Anthem. Anthem, 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 Anthem. How do you solve a problem like Anthem? Well, make it less fucking boring for a start. You make it a less boring player model for another start, for a second start. Oh my word, what a boring, boring game. This game, when it came out, was ridiculed, and looking back on it a few years later, doing these reviewing of every Xbox GamePass game, you can really see why. Boring. It's very, very boring. It's very cut and paste. It's very go to the place, shoot the thing, go to the next place, shoot the thing, go back. It's very dull. It's very lifeless. It's got the live service player model, which everybody with eyes and a brain knows that is a terrible, terrible thing. We've spoken about it before. The live service player model is awful because there is no end game. There is no end game, you just have to keep going. You keep going until the servers are turned off. Because there's no end game, you're just playing these pointless different missions over and over and over again until you've lost the will to live. That's Anthem. That you could have written that on the box blurb. You just keep going over and over and over until you've lost the will to live, and then you just eventually just move on to the next creation, which no doubt is going to be an Anthem 2 at some point. I don't know why, but yeah, fuck it. So, jump into the review here. So, graphically, yeah, it's a pretty game. It's a pretty good looking game. I don't know, graphically 9. I mean, yeah, it's a good looking game. There's explosions, they look cool. Monsters, they look cool. The design looks alright. There's, the first few missions you're jumping around. When you're doing the tutorial, you're sort of jumping around. There's different lagoon bits and you're flying around. And it's actually a pretty good looking game. So you can't take that away from it. Yeah, that's probably one of the only good things that it has going for it, that it is a very good looking game. But it's an EA BioWare game. Obviously it's going to be good looking. But unfortunately, good looking can't carry all of its weight, which is unfortunately my problem. Gameplay, 1. It's not the fact that it's a terrible sort of gameplay game. It's the fact that it's so repetitive and it's so boring. I was collecting the footage for this game and I was just bored off my tits. You just go to the same place, you go to the same places over and over again, you shoot the same enemies over and over again, which are usually copy and pasted. You do the same objectives over and over again, and then you go back to the hub world, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again until you've just lost the will to live. Occasionally you can jump up with different buddies, and you can do the same missions, but you've already done the missions, so what's the point? There's absolutely no purpose to jump back into this game because there's just no reason to. You play the same missions that you've done 1,000 times before, but because you're with someone else this time, is that meant to make it okay? No, not in my opinion. It's very, very dull. Don't do the live service model anymore. Just do a game that has an end and just have an ending and just be happy with it. But be done with it. Stop trying to squeeze every single penny for the sake of a live service model that doesn't work, because it shits on the gameplay and it makes it really fucking dull. Boring. Just don't pick it up. You've got 1,000 different games that are better, but you could easily compare Anthem and Destiny. At least Destiny gives you interesting new things to do and it keeps constant drops coming along. Anthem is just the same shit constantly. It's just, even if they did have any new mission drops, new things to drop to, it still boils down to the same thing. It still boils down to flying around, shooting the lad, fly to someone else, shoot the lad, fly somewhere else, shoot the lad, and then go home. Boring. Narrative, there isn't a narrative. 1. It's the live service monster. It takes over any creativity of making a story. There is some kind of branching story behind it, sure, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter and doesn't really mean anything. You could weave this perfect narrative, but if it's behind a live service model, it doesn't make any sense. Look at Avengers. Look at the Avengers game to start off with. It started off with a single-player story that actually wasn't half bad, and then the live service bullshit kicks in at the end, and then you just kind of realise that everything you did in that main story doesn't actually mean anything, because the game is just going to continue on regardless. Like in Avengers, you finish the game and it said, well, the fight is still going on. So what was I doing in the main story? It meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. Anthem has the same problem. There's a small narrative sort of continuing behind the background. When you're in the tutorial, that you've got 2 people fighting with this big monster rages on and whatever, snore. it's really difficult to keep tabs on that because you don't give a shit. And then you kind of ultimately realise the live service beast is still alive in the background, and it doesn't matter what this supposed overarching narrative is, because you're just going to have to keep doing the same missions over and over again. You're never really going to defeat the threat because you have to keep doing the same missions. It doesn't matter. Audio's good. You know, you hear the ping pings, you hear the shooty bang bangs, and yeah, it's good enough. The monster sound design is pretty good. I don't know, give it an 8. He's got to bring up the score somehow. Or well, if anyone gives a shit about these scores, they're arbitrary numbers. It doesn't really make... I'm coming up with them off the top of my head here. It doesn't really make a difference. Yeah, audio sounds good. The audio design is always going to be... The audio and the graphics was always going to be good. Yeah, there's nothing really else to say about the audio. It's just nice. Technically, it's really difficult to place this in a good in a good place, because I've played through this twice now and it bugged out. I played through it to review and I played through it to collect footage. In the footage, it was bugging out like no tomorrow. Enemies were flying around. Enemies were just moving different places. You'll see it in the footage. I'll keep it in. But it's actually quite a buggy game, which on top of all of its live service issues and all the problems that it had before, bug is the last thing it needs to just make it even more of a failure. It is a failure. It's difficult to say that it's not, because it is a failure in the fact that they tried to create an interactive medium and it just didn't work. It's difficult to really get behind this game. Technically, let's say middle of the road 5. It's difficult to get behind this game because of what it is. It showcases all the worst different features that the live service model does have. It's just boring, drab, boring, repetitive. It doesn't deserve your time, it doesn't deserve your money, and it didn't deserve it back then, and there's no real place for it to keep going. Maybe it'll keep going out of spite at this point. It's on Game Pass, and Game Pass is good. Everyone knows how good Game Pass is, so maybe there is a reason behind keeping it on there. But sooner or later, it's going to be a barren wasteland if it's not already. And then they'll just move on to the next project if they haven't already. Not really worth it. Not in my top recommendation list. It's not anywhere near the top recommendation list.